Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. I am Manzurul Haq, today's moderator, and our guest speaker today is a distinguished personality, not only from his own country, but all over ASEAN and beyond. Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, who had been in politics for more than 3 decades, 4 decades. And
I'm not that old.
He's not that old, but he's from very early age, he's in politics. During student days, he was involved with youth movement and later joined the governing coalition. And since then, ups and downs in his life he has experienced. Once he was a rising star within the ruling bloc of Malaysia and was widely considered to be the successor of Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. And he was seen and people were waiting for his days to come. And then later the days came, but with a different twist of fate. He fell out of grace of his mentors, and since then, taking a different path and challenging his mentors in politics. And he's still seen by many in Malaysia and overseas as a rising star, but the star who is now challenging his former mentors. And no doubt an uphill task, but Anwar Ibrahim is taking that challenge gracefully. In general election last year, his opposition coalition, as many of you know, has owned majority of votes, but a faulty voting system has robbed them of forming the government, and he's still the head of opposition coalition, and vying for a provincial chief minister seat in upcoming election on March 23rd. And that is also making the government nervous. And the Malaysian government is nervous for quite long of what his moves are. So that's why they're putting bars and barriers. He was imprisoned for many years, came out. And not only that, Malaysia probably is trying to influence other countries as well. We know that last month he was supposed to come to Tokyo. And from airport, just after 3 hours, he took the same flight back home and couldn't enter Japan. But probably he will touch on these issues. And Malaysia is going through a transition. That is, his first success. In last election, he had 2 successes. One is that winning the majority. Another is breaking the long-held strong position of the ruling coalition. 2/3 majority they had always since independence, and that has been broken. So 2 major breakthroughs Mr. Ibrahim and his supporters have made. And so future is, of course, not so bleak. It's a bright future, maybe we are hoping, looking forward to. And all these issues Mr. Ibrahim will be touching on, focusing on today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give a warm welcome to Mr. Anwar Ibrahim. So you'll be speaking sitting. So you can sit down.
Thank you, Manzurul Haq and friends from the Foreign Correspondents Club. Is always fortunate for me because in the absence of free media in Malaysia, I always will not reject any invitation from the Foreign Correspondents Club. You see, throughout the ASEAN, and of course here, this is not the first time that I've been here. And although unfortunately, I just gave confirmation yesterday afternoon about this event today. Now, Manzurul Haq has made references to a few issues which I'm deeply passionate about. Particularly the issue of deficit of democratic reforms in the Muslim world, the Arab Spring that started as quite euphoric in Tunisia and Egypt and Yemen, able to sustain in a way in Tunisia quite encouraging developments, but appalling conditions results as a result of the General Sisi's ruthless measures in Egypt, which is clearly disconcerting, not only to Egyptian Democrats, but also to the Muslim world. There are always questions whether there are ramifications to the region, to Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. My answer to that is that Indonesia led the spring a long time ago. Prior to that, of course, the Philippines and the People's Power. And even Malaysia is 98 reformasi. You could see this wave in clamoring for change. The route taken was not necessarily the manner you observe the Arab Springs, but clearly the clamor and the urge to demand freedom and human rights is, to me, very clear in the Muslim world. It's not a question being imposed, as many suggest. Even till lately, my old friend, Dr. Mahathir, is still pushing this agenda forward, saying that all this clamoring for reform on all-American agenda. We have a small by-election coming in the Selangor state that I'm contesting, and he said one vote for Anwar is one vote for America. So I responded, normally I don't take him seriously, by the way, so I responded by saying, it's not a bad thing because I'm going to, once I win, I'm going to change the ringgit to the dollar. Because it's three and a half ringgit to the dollar. But you can sense that the resistance to change by authoritarian leaders or dictators using their enormous wealth, I mean, you know, from Suharto regime to Marcos to Mahathir, children are all multi-billionaires, largely ignored even by so-called Democrats in Japan. Because sometimes the imperative is pure business and trade. So they tend to ignore the very principle that they are nations. The raison d'etre of many of these countries was set up in modern reform to establish a sustainable democracy. So I'm optimistic because as you observe in the last general elections in Malaysia, in May 2013, in the absence of a free media, denying access, even a minute of airtime to opposition leaders, including me, no report in the mainstream media, which is all controlled by the ruling party and its cronies, we could still garner 52% of the popular vote, which proves the point that you cannot underestimate the wisdom of the masses, that people generally are clamoring and wanting to preserve their own basic right and wanting the freedom and justice. We popularize the term not only democracy, but freedom and justice, because democracy is clearly meaningless if it does not have a clear agenda in ensuring there is a defense for human rights of those, including those marginalized and minorities, and justice, which must be clearly spelled out for all. That is why in Malaysia, in attempting to undertake this reform, even me as a Malay or Muslim in Malaysia, where we are the majority, has called for the dismantling of what I consider as obsolete race-based economic policies, the new economic policy. There may be wisdom. People still defend when you did initiate it in the 1970s. But people understand that as an attempt to ensure there is distributive justice, because the majority population denied, or at least do not have equal opportunities in business, in education, or social mobility. But when you look at it and assess some measure of success, yes, But when you assess the totality, then you realize that sort of facility is being used or abused to enrich family members and their cronies. I mean, how do you explain an ex-prime minister having children who are billionaires? Well, they may have won lottery every week, but that is one possibility. But other than that, it's clearly abuse of power and endemic corruption in the system. All government leaders, without exception, have amassed hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. So this facade of democracy, or judicial independence, or so-called media access, if they call it, they have. Certainly it's just a facade because you don't have. So when you talk about democratic reform, and one of the things that I did discuss with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation is to call for support from here, from Indonesia, from Turkey, and some other friendly countries to have a voice for Muslim Democrats. You know, that the whole notion and talk about whether Islam is compatible to democracy, to me, is quite irrelevant. You are not giving the opportunity, because issue incompatibility does not arise. Look at the history of Iraq, or Iran and the Mossadegh, or Indonesia in 1955. They went through relatively free, fair elections in 1955. And there's a classic account by Herbert Faith in The Decline of Constitutional Democracy in Indonesia, where he presented a compelling case in defense of democracy and commitment for democratic reforms in Indonesia in 1955, only to be hijacked later by Sukarno, probably at that time, due to Cold War influence and the reluctance of the West, in particular the United States, to endorse his regime, that he then tended to tilt to the left, to Moscow. So that is, what I'm focusing on in Malaysia and internationally. I've been traveling quite a bit after elections to Tunisia, Egypt, Turkey, the border of Syria, and Doha, and a few places, just to have first-hand knowledge and account of the role of the Democrats in demanding reforms. I think it needs some measure of concern and support by the international media and by governments who are really committed to reforms to at least support this agenda. The parameters are set clear. All the most corrupt or the most ruthless can call themselves democracies. So I think you are familiar with the term. North Korea is a democracy, South Korea is a democracy, Saddam claimed he was a Democrat. So, but I think what we need to do is, of course, to spell out whether there is a commitment for judicial independence and a free media, and freedom of expression and freedom of conscience, and economic policies that's relatively transparent. So I think this is what I'm committed to and will continue, inshallah. Now, I will conclude there because I know most of my accounts with the FCC, they're not interested to listen to what we have to say, but they want to ask questions. So I've agreed that you can ask the reasonably easier questions because I don't want to get into trouble with the immigration authorities. I'm joking. But I want to take this opportunity before I conclude to introduce the members of my delegation, which also represents the opposition coalition and rulings in 3 states. First, of course, is Professor Ramasamy, who is the Deputy Chief Minister of the state of Penang. He represents also the Democratic Action Party, one of the 3 members of the coalition. Then you have Kamaruddin Jaafar, also formerly an academic from the National University in Political Science, and he's a member of parliament from Kelantan, representing the Islamic Party. Don't worry, he's not here with his robe, so he's... and he was, until recently, the Secretary General of the Islamic Party, a member of our ruling coalition. And our youth leader of the Justice Party, Shamsul Iskandar, member of parliament, who defeated one of the UMNO stalwarts, a chief minister of the state of Malacca. So he's a giant killer. We may have more like him. So it says he's a member of parliament now, who defeated that incumbent chief minister, who is one of the key leaders of the UMNO. And of course, Khalid Jaafar, who is the director of the Institute of Policy Research. I mean, the rest, of course, are Malaysians and friends from Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So that's it as an introduction. And Munzul Haq will then moderate the question-answer session. Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anwar Ibrahim. Those who are interested to more about his political views and about his life and ups and downs, there's a new book written by an American scholar, Charles Allers. It's on him, The Evolution of a Muslim Democrat, The Life of Malaysia's Anwar Ibrahim. And just a reminder that this is the 3rd time Dr. Anwar Ibrahim is at the club. First time he spoke here as Deputy Prime Minister during his high days with the ruling bloc. And then he came in 2006, just after coming out of the prison. And 3rd time he is here. We are hoping 3rd time would have been the last time. But he could make it at least this time. Ladies and gentlemen, now floor is open. Please raise your hand and come forward, identify yourself, and before asking questions. Yes, please, Anthony.
Good afternoon. Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. It's been many years since I lived in Singapore and spent a lot of time in Malaysia, and that I'm sure will be obvious from my question. But most of the ASEAN states, certainly Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia to some extent, have to walk a very delicate balance, walk a very delicate line in trying to maintain a balance between the indigenous communities and the Chinese communities and to some extent Indians and others. But I'm not quite clear how your desire for, I think what you called democratic reform in the Muslim world fits in with this. I mean, I'm not quite clear what exactly you're trying to achieve and how this fits in with the need to be non-aligned, if you like, within the ASEAN states.
No, the ASEAN states, of course, you have vibrant democracy like the Philippines and Indonesia, and struggling one like Thailand. And we have, of course, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. Now, Muslim Democrats must be inclusive, Malaysia. We're not talking about Muslims. We're talking about the country. Muslim democracy cannot be exclusive to Muslims in Malaysia because we have at least more than 40% of the population are non-Muslims. That is why, even for the matter Indonesia, although the percentage of population of non-Muslim are smaller, but not necessarily all are aligned or having the same religious persuasion or ideological persuasion. That is why the answer in democracy is a free choice. So the people ask, what is your position into what is the political philosophy? I normally avoid labels or slogans, but then we make it very clear what we want in what is termed as clearly stipulated, provided for in the constitution or constitutional guarantees, like the issue of freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. Although Islam is the religion of the Federation, But no way should you use that provision to compel non-Muslims to accept your rule or your decision, or particularly in relation to the Sharia. Similar position, like the official language is Malay language. It should not be used to curb the study or advancement of other languages, particularly English, which is still remain to be very important, or Chinese, which is not considered to be a vernacular language of the ethnic Chinese, but very important regional language or economic language of the region. Then we have Tamil, we have Arabic. So I think if the parameters are spelled out clearly, freedom of expression, rule of law, a more transparent economy. I mean, you can't have this system where you award contracts without tenders, questionable procurement policies, where corruption tends to be endemic, and still call yourself a moderate Muslim country. I have a strong reservation about some of the so-called democratic countries coming and saying, well, thank you very much, it is a great democracy and you are very moderate. He can be either semi-literate saying that or completely oblivious to the stark realities. Yes, of course, we're not Syria, or we're not, the Prime Minister is not General Sisi, but you don't have a free media. A questionable legal process at times. And corruption is endemic, that you don't have a proper, transparent procurement policy. Yeah? But without a free media, fraudulent electoral process, how do you call ourselves a moderate Muslim? I have strong reservations. In fact, since many of my non-Muslim friends don't realize, by trying to appease due to their business interests or diplomatic interests, by praising the corrupt or the authoritarian leaders as moderate Democrats, you are insulting the intelligence of general Muslims. I mean, that is my position. So how do you navigate in a country that is multiracial, multi-ethnic? I mean, by first being inclusive. That is why we decided in the Malaysian context to make sure, although the majority Chinese or Indian-based parties, with, of course, there are Muslims in the party, in the Democratic Action Party, or the Islamic Party, which has been there for the last over 50 years, with avowed position in promoting Islam and implementing Islam, with our Justice Party combined in a coalition. But they say then these are desperate parties with contradicting ideas or policies. I say no, because we agreed on the common agenda. We were committed to it. There is no question about democratic reforms or rule of law or freedom of expression or economic policies that would ensure justice for all. And this is duly agreed upon, signed prior to the elections. It's not an electoral sort of an arrangement after elections.
Okay, it's a follow-up question. Yes, yeah, please.
But who is primarily responsible for denying these things, for denying you these freedoms that you're looking for? Is it? Who is it? Who, in particular, is it people from all sides? Is it a particular group of people who is principally responsible for denying these freedoms?
It is the ruling party. I mean, it's ruling government, coming from, you know, the authoritarian streak of Mahathir. I mean, look at the rule of law; it's complete destruction. I mean, I served under him. I mean, I'm not. I don't think it's just fair to deny some of the positive work, particularly in terms of industrialization, economic advancement. But in the process, the judiciary destroyed, complete curb on media freedom, mass arrest of all this opposition. There's not Anwar. I mean, don't be mistaken. There's thousands who are arrested, political leaders, student leaders, union leaders, without trial. And of course, economic policy that ends up by making children, their own children, billionaires. You can't have a transparent system, and claim to have a transparent system when you end up having prime ministers or ministers with such amassing such enormous wealth in a country that is relatively rich, but you have pockets of poverty or abject poverty or grinding poverty among the, particularly in the marginalized rural sector, some pockets of ethnic Indians. That's shameful. I was looking at the infant mortality rate in Malaysia among some of the tribes. It's one of the highest in Asia. You talk about Gini coefficient. We are, of course, among the lowest, but we still perform better than Papua New Guinea. So I take pride in announcing that. Like economic performance in the 1990s, all the figures, growth, we were #1 in ASEAN. Foreign direct investments, #1 in ASEAN. Market capitalization, #1 in ASEAN. Competitiveness, #2 after Singapore. You see? Now, we are not doing that badly because we're still better than Myanmar. But Malaysia deserves better because our infrastructure and our economic resources and human resource capacity is certainly far more advanced than many countries. How do you explain this fall, except for poor governance and endemic corruption?
Okay, Joel and then Khaldun, yeah.
Hello, Joël Lejean from RTL France Broadcasting. Thank you for coming back again. I have two questions. The first one is about, Japan is having a very much interest for Southeast Asia right now. So I'd like you to see what you perceive from that move, and what do you think is Japan's intention, actually. And the second question is, when you raised an important issue, which is democracy and Islam. Living in France, I can understand some people ask these questions, although except some groups, we don't have really much problems with that at all, because we have probably recognized the values. And I would like you to talk to us about what you can see like the sharing values that we have between Islam and the rest of the world, and not necessarily ending into a fight between Sunni and Shia, but what is the sharing values we have all together here? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Now, Japan is, of course, an important country in the region. Although I don't necessarily share the so-called Look East policy, but Japan remains an important country to the region, to Malaysia, and for us to view their industrial experience, their concern with the environment, their issue with technology, and of course educational standards. We don't have a problem with that. The Japanese government, in terms of course, particularly the foreign policy, has been so excessively careful, except in their relationship with South Korea and China, that they are not giving the desired impact. I mean, it's hypersensitivity when dealing with groups other than governments. Hypersensitivity in interacting. I'm not saying that they should meet. I mean, I go to Indonesia. I met the president. I met the prime minister of Philippines, the president of Philippines, or the prime minister of Thailand, for example. Yeah, but there is this detached position that you only deal with establishment. I mean, coming from a democratic country, I find it difficult to understand and appreciate. You know. You recognize whoever is the government, but you can ignore the vast sentiments, and particularly the majority sentiments of the people. I promote these bilateral relations, both trade or investments, and beyond that, education in terms of philosophy, civilizational understanding in dialogues between Malaysia and Japan. Because I see the positive traits in their cultural traits that would benefit us immensely. That was, of course, that is up to the Japanese government to respond. Although I must say, in terms of universities, academics, and think tanks, including the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, for example, they have been very forthcoming, very supportive in terms of initiating this non-governmental organization and people-to-people set up. They want to engage with the region. And of course, we welcome that. You know, one of the issues I had with Mahathir those days, when he promoted this East Asia Economic Caucus, I, of course, that my position number 2, advised him to say that, you know, this shows that over-dependence on China, to an extent, Japan. As a small country in ASEAN, we should engage with Japan and China or Korea. We must also engage with Australia. The only reason you want to cut off Australia is the same reason that they accuse us of, as you claim. Is of course, you are again, because you say Australia is not Asian, they are white. You know, they are not Asians. I dispute that sort of a thinking, because I think that is semblance of racist rhetoric, a reaction to what we condemn. And at the same time, having that, where do you place India? India is important to me. It's a vibrant economy. It's an important country in the region. For a small country, this engagement is important other than dividing to, you know. So to me, if you were told to have a regional setup, must be Asia, with excellent relation with the EU and United States in terms of trading and investments. We can express our strong disagreement or reservations against some of the positions taken by the foreign policy of the United States, unlike the Japanese, who've been very strong with it. That's for the Japanese government to decide. But I would take that sort of a position. So we look at Japan as an important country economically. I mean, notwithstanding all this, you know, temporary or whatever problems that you see in terms of economic growth, but no one can deny that this phenomenal transformation of Japan after the Second World War into a vibrant economy. And it would be futile, it would be at the expense of our country, particularly like Malaysia, a small country, that are not able to learn, appreciate the strength in the cultural fabric and society that was able to bring up that sort of economy. Not in terms of obsession to look east. I should say we should look to the world, but you have to learn. And I think it should be reciprocal in the sense that the Japanese must view this in this context, rather than confining it only to trade and investment and some diplomatic encounter, just because you seem to have a problem with China and South Korea for the present. And that's the first issue. On the second issue on Muslim democracy, you are right. It is not only a problem of some of the, you know, like Islamophobia. You see, like Fox News, for example. I was teaching at the Georgetown University, and sometimes we listen. I'm quite shocked how they present Islam. But having taught in the United States, you realize it's not shared by everybody. You know, but it's also how we articulate the Muslim position on democracy. We cannot be exclusive. You don't talk about, you know, Islamic position. No, I mean democracy when it comes to issue of freedom, or human rights, or gender equality, or free media. I mean that is a universal concern. What is there to show a difference with Europe or United States? I made this reference yesterday, for example, in the initial experiment with democracy in Indonesia. There was a huge debate on pornography. Okay, some Europeans may disagree with us, but on this small section of pornography, Indonesians seems to be tougher than the rules that you see in Europe. But it's fine. But at least on the issue of free media, or issue of judicial independence, or independent commission against corruption, you must set up institutions in place. This is the internal dynamics that is urgently required among Muslims themselves. When they tend to speak as if, you know, as a reaction of Huntington's, you know, thesis. Huntington say, you know, us and them, and we also respond likewise. You are no better than Huntington. I mean, I was looking at some of the literature of the Muslim scholars. When they speak in that language, you know, Christians are the problem against Hindus, the problem against the Jews. I mean, it's just like the reverse of Huntington. I mean, where do you differ? For example, you look now remember this French, Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, which is a brilliant thesis to understand democracy in the United States. It takes a brilliant French to write about American democracy. It's interesting. But anyway, to me, it's compulsory reading. When I was teaching at Georgetown University, or when I lead the Justice Party, I say party leaders must read Democracy in America. First is the French, second is democracy, and third United States. But there's so much in common in terms of habits of the heart, you know, that democracy does not work and operate unless there is that, I use Malik Ben Nabi, who talk about inner struggle of conscience. Tocqueville talks about, referred to habits of the heart. I mean, there's that sort of innate commitment to respect freedom and human rights. Okay? So I think, where do we differ? I don't differ. I'm in the spirit of the French Revolution in many ways. I don't differ. We disagree with some issues of laïcité, which is, you know, secularism to me, it's quite extreme in France, or the more nuanced secularism in the West and the other countries of the States. Okay, we have some shades of differences, but should not differ in the fundamental question of human rights, of freedom that we cherish. And more so, in my understanding of democracy, which would be rendered meaningless if it does not promote justice for all. So I think in my small effort when I speak, I tend to see this as universal human endeavor. Yes, we have problems of prejudices, of racial hatred, of religious bigotry within the Muslims, within the Hindus, as you see in India, within the Christian right. Yes, we have. Or with the position taken by Israel against the Palestinians, which are all issues that we have to deal with. But generally, as a whole, it is a universal endeavor for freedom and justice. And what we say in the Muslim Democrats is just that, pampasa. But there is a democracy deficit in the Muslim world. That is why it is more compelling to insist that the Muslim world address this issue and question. Because I have come to a stage having very cynical with the so-called the West or United States having so concerned to promote democracy. No. They seem to be promoting Sisi than democracy.
Okay, Khaldun.
Shukran, Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you. It's good to see you again. My name is Khaldun Azari. I'm for some Arabic media, so we are very much interested in your insights about the so-called Arab Spring. But before that, I had a question, but you answered part of it about what is your foreign policy initiatives that you would take in case you get into the power in Malaysia that are different from the current government, especially on the military issues and on the presence of United States forces in Asia. And now Asia has a lot of territorial disputes in the region, and they really start to threat the stability or the current regime. So do you see different approach that Malaysia should take? And if you have any other dispute in this regard with other countries? So what is your party and group foreign policy initiatives for the foreign policy of Malaysia? Thank you.
First, on the issue of defense policy, I mean, I was probably finance minister for too long, so I have this concern about overspending on military armaments. Defense strategy is critical. Countries must have defense capabilities, but over-reliance on it will be at the expense of education, public health, and people's welfare. And my decisions, therefore, to have adequate, efficient military spending, which happens to be one of the most corrupt in most countries. And this is where most money is stolen, but you have an efficient, transparent system, but then the resources must be for education, basic infrastructure, and public health. Now, on terms of foreign policy, there are some things which we share with the present government, but you said if. I don't think the question is right. You say when we assume power. I thought you are a friend, yeah. No, no. Okay. Okay. Now, I think we should be more I should say, not the terms, more active in the foreign policy. Mahathir was, I mean, in the sense, during his time, in terms of engagement with Africa, with the developing world, with Japan, China, or less so probably Europe and the States. I would say I would enhance that, in developing countries, Muslim countries, Japan and China in the region, India, and also United States. Because to me, we can reserve our strong policy differences with the United States on many issues, but in terms of engaging, I think we should enhance that. Not just to agree. I mean, the problem is that when we go say Obama, yes, Mr. President. You sign TPP, yes, Mr. President. I mean, that's not wise. You must preserve your independence and right. My experience with the Americans, of course, if you can, these are big countries, is big nations, so they assume it's easier to deal with those who agree with them. But I think to be fair, the American system allows you to negotiate and make it known your position. So my answer to that is a more active foreign policy, a clear position vis-a-vis human rights and democratic reforms. I'm not suggesting we go and wage war in all countries, but your position is known. I mean, it's shameful, if not pathetic, for a Muslim to talk about modernity, relevance of Islam, when you find the most ruthless, backward, and corrupt Muslim countries. Do you take a position? I mean, which is consistent. I mean, I was joking with them. There's one of the great, most outstanding Muslim scholars in the world, the late Toshihiko Jutsu, Japanese. Not known because they think all great Muslim scholars are Arabs. No, most of them are, but not necessarily all. And one is, of course, this great Toshihiko Izutsu, which is not too known in Japan. Yeah, which is very unfortunate. I mean, this is a giant of an intellectual, of a philosopher, scholar. I mean, you mention his name and promote him. Is permeates to the entire Muslim world. Now, Izutsu talks about what he considers to be a morally justifiable principle on the issue of freedom, or what is right, what is morally correct, must be consistent and coherent throughout the ages. Okay, and so I think that's my position. Although I think given the slide in the economy, problem with race relations, which was asked earlier in Malaysia, you can't use the word Allah, Bible in Malay confiscated, 100-year-old Hindu temple demolished. I mean, you go, and then there's on and on. They're creating this sort of a simmering tension. I think our first few years should be to renew that zeal, the confidence that we are one. There must be religious tolerance. There's no reason why a Muslim country should go and demolish a 100-year-old temple, because that would encourage some Hindu extremists to go and demolish another 200-year-old mosque. You see? So that is why what Hizutsu says is important. It's a morally justified principle. If you say it's unjust to demolish an old mosque in India, it's also unjust to demolish a 100-year-old temple in Malaysia. I mean, to me, it's consistent. And that, I think, is some of the issues that we have to address. Thank you.
Yes, the floor is now open. Yes, please.
Thank you and welcome. My name is Errol Ahmed. I freelance and I also have a small research media outlet. I'm also Turkish. You mentioned that you want to go to Turkey, Egypt to see how the democracies are working there. And Turkey used to be, well, known to be one of the most successful democracies in the region, going through pretty turbulent times right now, especially when it comes to press freedom. Some of the things that you mentioned, I was just reading them on the press. My first question is whether you've been following what's happening there. And the second question is, what do you think about and how do you relate to the general question of Muslim democracies? Well, you already answered those questions in quite detail, but thank you.
Notwithstanding some of the issues in Turkey or Indonesia, in terms of, like, Indonesia is still considered to be quite corrupt, although the institutions are independent and taking tough actions. Or Turkey with the problem with Fethullah Gulen supporters, the simmering division within the AK party, etc. And the way Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan is handling it. These two countries are still, in the present time, two examples of emerging vibrant democracies. You don't foresee a possibility right now, for example, turning back to military dictatorship both in Turkey and in Indonesia. God permit that the democracy can be sustained. But again, I say, notwithstanding some of the limitations and flaws, the institutions are in place. Media is vibrant. People are more critical when they're open in the streets or in the media or in parliament. Economy is, of course, because of that, or partly, then you find there's more vibrancy or hope in terms of economic progress. You can see Indonesia in this region, for example, from low threshold, have surpassed many of its neighbors, including Malaysia. They have not surpassed economically in terms of the wealth, but in terms of growth, in the market capitalization, in terms of the speed of reform and investments is more encouraging, promising. Similarly, with Turkey, both in terms of economic and political reform. I appreciate your concern that temporarily in the last few months and now, Turkey is undergoing this not turbulent but certainly troublesome period that have seen a lot of criticism and the manner the AK party government is dealing with the media and the response to the social media. But I remain very optimistic. I know Turkey quite well. I travel very regularly there. I meet most leaders, including Prime Minister, a few times a year. And then, of course, in my exchanges, I express some of my views very frankly and openly. But I still see it as, there's a group that is very committed to democratic reforms. There's now undergoing some challenges, particularly after taking a strong position on the Arab Spring that shocked many people, and also on the Palestinian issue that created a lot of enmity with the Western media, some parts of the Western media. And I think it's, if we could navigate, particularly in this critical time, well, by not disrupting that democratic agenda in terms of a free media, independent judiciary, and the resolve to promote economic growth, they would be successful. I'm more optimistic than many on the future of Turkey.
Yes, Fusan.
But just on Turkey, just before that, people say I'm a bit too guarded when it comes to Turkey because Tayyip is my friend. But notwithstanding that, I'm quite open, and my exchanges with him are quite frank. He knows me, and I know him well. And I would take credit because he takes, at least from me, very, very tough, differences, and we are great friends.
Well, he's been very, very successful. One of the things that happened in a few months shocked a lot of people,
yes,
including myself. So that was part of the question, actually.
Thank you for coming to the FCCJs for such a short notice. Thank you very much. I'm from Singapore Press Holding, and I'd like to know that you are detained to coming into Japan on January 19th. I'd like you to conclude what happened when you, in that moment, and now what you feel about it, and is it being solved, or you still have some questions, some comments on this? And the second question is that I know that during the election, you're talking about free media. I think the social media did a lot for you. So can you give us some of the, during the elections, how it helps, and in the overall comments for the last election? Thank you.
I think the unfortunate experience at the airport, Narita Airport, in January, is, I think, an attempt by the Foreign Ministry and Immigration to give me additional publicity in Japan and in the world. I remember the BBC correspondent was telling me, no, you've been quiet for some time. I think time for you to reappear in the international media. But, of course, it is unfortunate because we did check. Both the Sasakawa staff checked with the Foreign Ministry prior to my arrival, and my staff with the embassy. So I would still stand there. If they say there's an old ruling on the conviction, I want to remind them I have been here 4 times since. The first time, yes, they were required to have all these technical procedures. And not the other 3 times I was here without any problem. But what more important is, both in Tokyo and in Kuala Lumpur, we checked. There's nothing is required. But I'm here. It's okay. You say difficulty, but this is small. I told the immigration chief, it's okay. He said, I'm sorry, sir, this is procedure. We have to. Okay, I said nothing. At least I'm detained for 3 hours. I'm detained for 3 hours. I was in solitary confinement for 6 years. 3 hours is nothing. And they didn't serve me anything, but I wasn't hungry at that time, so I was okay. So, and I said what's more important when I think Chairman Yerohan Yu was kind enough to go himself to Kuala Lumpur and apologize on the behalf of the foundation. I said, it's all right. But we have to move on because to my mind, the bilateral relations is more important. The bilateral relations between Malaysia and Japan, and our agenda for Forum for Muslim Democrats is, to me, is more important. But what I had to endure, it's just a flight to and back, and the stewardess gave me took very good care of me, so I don't have much complaints. Now, and I think the great thing about going through the worst detention and assault and solitary confinement, you give you more compassion and more forgiving. You see, and all right. Second question, social media is true. You look at 1998, after my arrest, the the use of Facebook at that time was blogs and the internet was so high and phenomenal that became probably at that time the largest increase in a few weeks in the whole world. You see? That was in 98, which means Malaysians, particularly the more educated ones, realize that they no longer can depend on the official mainstream television and newspapers. So they resort to this. And we have had that much of a foothold, which is quite impressive. And during the last elections, when you are denied access to the media, we won almost all the urban seats and suburban seats because the alternative media. We lost badly in the rural heartland because, you know, there's no access to the media. So I remember the Chief Minister of Sarawak, who is now, due to be retired, his response after the election was, we are fortunate because our people are not corrupted by the social media. And they have no access to the media. So we are very fortunate. Oh, my God. So that was it. On the social media. But, you know, people say we do, all is done by me or my outfit or the party leader. It's not true. You know, the young guys on their own, in their Facebook, so ingenious methods that they use and so impressive. You remember the last elections? To 2013, we garner more than 52% of popular votes. There are a lot of allegations of fraud. And, of course, the ruling party garnered more seats in parliament. There were huge protests. The young guys, through their Facebook, talk about Black 505 at a time when I was not convinced that we should all come in black. Because I say black, certainly not. Familiar with the Chinese tradition, black, or the Western, but not necessarily Muslim. The Muslims don't have that black tradition. So, but the Facebook then, except for the Shia, yeah. The Shia is quite familiar with the black. So, but because by that time, 140,000 people say, we will attend and we want Anwar to come in black. So I had to agree. I said yes, you know. So it's interesting, the power of the social media, not necessarily directed by us, but sometimes dictated by them. And this is, to me, is very, very hopeful in terms of a vibrant democratic process. Because otherwise we have no defense. There's no report in the media. You know, for example, when I was, not deported, I was sent back to Kuala Lumpur, a lot of theories. You see, how can Malaysians accept him as a leader? Even the Japanese refuse to accept him. I say, not the Japanese, only the immigration, the foreign ministry. The rest are okay. But then they say, probably because he's involved with the Yakuza. So I say I was supposed to be only a CIA agent, not a Yakuza. And then another report. But maybe because they knew he was involved in some pornographic acts. I thought the Japanese are more tolerant of that. But anyway, no, I'm joking. So please don't report. Now, all my defense is not a word. For example, now, yesterday we arrived. Nothing in the media. You see? So to the Malaysian public generally, Anwar is banned from Japan. You know what it means? The power of censorship. You see? So we have to mount this kind of campaign. Look, Anwar was here, and the Foreign Correspondents Club has declared their support for me. You're supposed to be independent, I'm joking. I'm a bit relaxed with how happy I am to be back in Japan. Can you realize? Thank you very much.
Do you have some spare time?
Yeah, all right.
Anthony has one more question to ask.
Can I ask you a nice, simple question? What is the future of ASEAN? I mean, when you look at Northeast Asia, it's in turmoil relatively. There's an awful lot of friction now among China and Japan and Korea. And by comparison, Malaysia looks like, or ASEAN looks like a sea of tranquility. So, I mean, are these tensions in Northeast Asia likely to reinforce solidarity in, and perhaps even sort of looking towards self-sufficiency in Southeast Asia? Or are the kind of internal tensions that you talked about in some of the ASEAN countries likely to delay the integration of the region, do you think?
No, I think I must commend ASEAN for whatever limitations now, to say that at least it has been able to hold together, enhance its diplomatic and political relationship, that one cannot underestimate its importance. After decades, you can sense that the neighbor, however tense the relation over, for example, Filipino claims to Sabah, or the skirmish in the south of the Philippines, or south of Thailand, for example, or now problems in Myanmar, we were able to hold together. That is the positive part. But my criticism of ASEAN is, firstly, is not new. Even when I was Deputy Prime Minister, I wrote a piece in the then Asia Week calling for a constructive engagement, because it is disgusting, to say the least, for ASEAN to remain muted. At the time was when there was clear abuse, basic abuse of human rights. Aung San Suu Kyi has to endure prison or house arrest. So ASEAN countries, quietly having these deals, they talk about constructive engagement. What happened in effect is construction. They have construction companies going there. So it is, they talk about constructive engagement, but they have construction projects. And I then, in the Asia Week piece, which was later supported by Surin Pitsuwan, I talked about constructive intervention. Not by military force, but very strong position vis-à-vis human rights and economic measures. What happened afterwards was only after the pressure from EU and the United States on Myanmar, not the ASEAN initiative as claimed. Now, look at what's happening now in Myanmar. The killing, the rape, the burning of the Rakhine and Rohingyas, completely muted. It's shameful, for us to just not be able to do anything. Aziza, my wife, wrote a long personal letter to Aung San Suu Kyi because she happened to be very quiet on these issues too. But that reflects on the failure of ASEAN, The other problem which we have to address for economic relations, which is very far from being considered to be satisfactory. So Pachai, before he was WTO, when he was a minister, had lengthy sessions. He was one of the few at that time was pushing the agenda. He says, "Anwar, the future must be through some sort of strong economic relationship and engagement. Singapore, Philippines, and Indonesia, all these countries together, because then only can you have a stronger economic base and bargaining position vis-à-vis India, China, Europe, and America." We were not that successful. So I think whilst you credit ASEAN, but I think they have to move on the issue of freedom, human rights, democratic rule. Now we have, for the first time, although not that highlighted in the media, the first major internal rift on the view vis-à-vis China. The Philippines takes a tough position because they become a bit disillusioned or cynical on the part of the failure of ASEAN to address the issue effectively. And this, to me, must be addressed because you have few countries completely or seemingly subservient to China. Few countries do not want to be, involved, and Philippines take a tougher position. This is the first major test for ASEAN because in the last Foreign Ministers session, his government, they failed to reach a consensus on a position of engagement or deal vis-à-vis China. Thank you very much for your attention. And
thank you very much, Dr. Anwar Ibrahim. We come to the conclusion of this session, and as a small token of appreciation, I, on behalf of the club, offer you 1-year guest membership.
Okay.
So when you become Prime Minister next time, don't forget the club.
Thank you.
Because usually political leaders, once they assume the position of power, they go to National Press Club.
I came here as Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, yes. And next we want to see you as Prime Minister.
So they gave me 1 year.
Yes, we'll be extending.
They say when I'm Prime Minister, I don't need this car.
You don't need
but now I need it.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.